Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday. We are here, IDAGIOlive.com, but IDAGIO Live, the place where classical music happens. One of my favorite titles, as you well know. We are still at it. We are exactly a year ago. I started these Thursday evening chit-chats with colleagues and shakers and makers of the classical industry. It's been a heck of a lot of fun. And every so often, I get to talk with somebody who I don't know at all. And that's really quite exciting for me, because when are we all going to cross paths and to exchange ideas as classical musicians and talk about the business and get to know one another is always really exciting. And of course, tonight, as you can see, sitting here with me is Colin Currie, who is one of the most exciting musicians on the planet today. Obviously, the new wave of the new brilliance, as we say, in the industry, which is very exciting. I've seen some of the accolades written about your work, Colin, and it's kind of, stunning, exciting, breathtaking. I mean, I don't know what other accolades you could possibly want, but since we don't know each other, and since it's my show, I get to know you. And we get to know you, and you don't get to know me, but I get to know you. So I must say, in going through everything, we want to talk about your album. We want to talk about your new label. By the way, Idagio.com. Idagio.com is a streaming platform, and then we have Idagio Live as the video programs that we do. I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then we have, of course, the Global Concert Hall. And one of the great partners in the Global Concert Hall, since we launched last June, has been the London Symphony Orchestra, LSO. They've really thrown into the digital world in a very, very big and extremely interesting way. And that's kind of, I think, how our orbits came together. You're very linked with LSO, your label, your work, your artistic position. So Colin, it's a thrill to get to know you, and although I don't really know you, so if you wouldn't mind, for my benefit, where do you come from? I mean, where did you go to school? If you got 16 siblings, were you all beating around on garbage cans until your mother said, "Learn some music"? Or give us a Wikipedia here for 5 or 6 minutes.
Well, this is it's a very big build-up. I will struggle to live up to any of those accolades and such like. And I wish I could say, yes, I'm from planet Zorg and I'm 3,000 years old. But actually, I was born in Edinburgh, and I grew up there very happily. Fantastic childhood, early or where it was going, but there was something about, especially the drum set. I think initially the snare drum, I remember being just so captivated by the sound of this instrument. It's a very kind of sharp sound, very articulate. There's no other drum like it. There's no other sound like it. And I got my first sort of toy drums, really, when I was 2 or 3 years old. They didn't last very long. They ended up in smithereens pretty quickly. And I began with the piano, because there was solid musical tradition in the family. No professional performing musicians, but teachers, and my mother was an excellent musician, very good ear, all kinds of things that were important. So I started with the piano and learned to read music that way. But the drums was where it was at, and I got my first drum lesson age 6. And went through a lot of the usual kinds of things. I wanted to be a pop musician. I wanted to be a jazz musician. And then eventually, like a lightning bolt, along came classical music. And then I knew that was the thing. The drums, the pop musician, all that then became secondary or tertiary to classical music.
When was that? How old were you when that awakening sort of happened?
12 or 13, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Through
you
a couple of channels.
In Edinburgh.
Yeah, I was, yes. I was very lucky growing up in Scotland. There was a lot of fantastic orchestras that I was able to join. Youth orchestras. I went away age 13 And on the repertoire were two pieces that just blew away: Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony and Respighi's Pines of Rome. And he just being in an orchestra that with these sounds and this incredible music around me was just it was beyond words. And as you know yourself, just the proximity to that kind of repertoire is just something that even now you can't be put into words, really.
No.
And I mean, from there, I started to take my studies, I suppose, quite a bit more seriously. Go on, yeah.
In general, your studies, that bumps your whole game up.
Yeah, I realized that the more you know, the more you don't know, and I think even at that age, I was beginning to realize, goodness, especially as an orchestral player, so much that you understanding and finesse and technique and experience and learning to play in an ensemble and making sound and knowing about plates, and it just exponential ideas starting to come into my head. And at that point, I went over to Glasgow for weekly lessons at the Royal Scottish Academy Music and Drama, as it was then called. Excuse me. And had two incredible teachers who really changed my life: a percussion teacher named Pamela Dow, and a piano teacher called Sheila Desson. And although I was terrible shakes at the piano, these lessons at the piano were extremely important for me, because I was playing for the first time this sort of serious repertoire, Bach, Brahms, Debussy, and having these very in-depth conversations with my piano teacher about this music. And just every week my head would just so I was extremely lucky with my tuition.
Going back and forth between Edinburgh and Glasgow, is that a train proposition or a car proposition?
That's a train in my case. My father would give me a lift every Saturday morning and drop me off at Haymarket Station, and I would get the 804 to Glasgow Queen Street, sitting there doing my theory homework on the train.
But just for all of us to understand, I mean, how many minutes is that on the train?
It's 45, 50.
Okay.
So
look, I want you to hold that thought. I need to do a little technical thing here. I've actually logged into the wrong server, and that's why I'm cutting in and out on you, and it's making me crazy. So I'm going to change servers, and I may disappear, but I'll come back. Hang on. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, just hang on 2 seconds.
Do not adjust your sets.
Sometimes it happens seamlessly, and sometimes it looks like it happened this time seamlessly. How nice is that? Now everything should be a lot. I have 2 different servers in my house. That sounds exotic, but it's actually just a mess. Anyway, I think I won't lose you so much. Every once in a while, you'd be in a sentence and then freeze. Now, anyway, moving forward. Okay, so you grew up. What was obviously music was a big deal in your household. Was it classical or was it ecumenical? Was it everything? And I mean the drums as well. I mean, I must say, when I think about the times I've been in Edinburgh, especially in the summer, when you have all the tourists, one hears a lot of drums.
Yeah, sure.
Was that kind of what was going on with you as a kid?
It was a little bit of everything. I mean, the musical tastes in the house. I mean, I remember a lot of jazz going on. Oscar Peterson. There was a lot of Oscar. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
my idol.
Sure.
I mean, oh my God, what? Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So some great albums there, including a very famous album that I still love very much, which is the Live at the Royal Festival Hall with John Hurd and Louis Bellson on the drums. It's a live album. I mean, it's just, but similarly, I remember being taken to concerts with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra. I remember hearing Murray Pariah play Mozart. That was something that I still remember. It was just this extraordinary, delicate, intimate, and sort of perfect musical experience. And I remember hearing the Royal Scottish Orchestra play the Firebird. And, these are all things that just randomly come to mind. And then in the Edinburgh Festival, which
I was going to say, the Edinburgh Festival, as well as the Fringe Festival, must have been staples of your summer diet.
Yeah, exactly. We would go in to town and hear concerts and street musicians, and of course the Edinburgh Military Tattoo with
Well,
marching
is that
bands.
exactly? That just seems to be I sang the festival I was in. I've been in Edinburgh for musical reasons, a handful of times, maybe two hands, and it just seems to me that there's this presence of drums and fife and percussion. It's not just tattoo. It just seems, I don't know why, but it just seems it seems to be a part of it. Is it also part of the folk idiom?
Well, I would say even where I grew up in Collington, we live quite near the barracks where the army are based partially, and I was just there the other day in Edinburgh, and I once again when you're outside in our back garden, you can hear the military band practicing. You can hear especially the pipes. And I remember when I was a Cub Scout, one of the things there was an opportunity to learn to play either the pipes or the drums. So I actually had a bit of a go on both. So
I was going to ask you, Jeff, you played the pipes?
Just the chanter. I mean,
is it as difficult as they say it is?
It's a lot of puff. It's a lot of puff.
I played the tuba as a kid. So wow. I probably got plenty of puff, but I think it's this coordination of the squeezing, the puffing, and the blowing, as well as probably there should be some diapason relevant in the movement. I mean, I find the whole thing, watching it and listening, rather extraordinary. What is the beginning of the bagpipe?
I love the pipe.
Extraordinary. Yeah, what is this sound? What is it? Where was it invented? I don't know anything about do you know anything about the genealogy? I mean, it sounds like somebody got something in a lamb's lung or something, and it all started out, with a stick in a sheep's mouth or something. I mean, it just seems extraordinary to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to bring in an expert on that one. I mean, I think the thing with the pipes and the drums is that they made a hell of a racket. A loud. The decibel level was big, and they were, for better or for worse, there are military connotations. And army bands would be the first ones to tackle these instruments. So I think the pipes, when they were discovered, could make this rather terrifying or inspiring sound.
I don't want to waste a lot of time on this, and you're right. We should bring in an expert. I should have done my homework, but it fascinating. It makes sense to me that would have been an instrument it's like the American bugle. You've got to play something that carries over the din of the battlefield, and the clanking of swords, and every Hollywood movie we know from the Scots and their love of fighting. I can imagine they had to come up with an equally strong instrument to sort of get the message across. But this could all be complete nonsense, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just imagining this. But the sound. Have you ever played with the pipes?
I haven't actually. I mean, it's something I'd like to do more, especially because the snare drums that are used in these bands, I absolutely love them. I've got a proper Scottish style marching snare drum, and any drummer will tell you that the interesting thing about it is that the top head, it's rocks like a tabletop. It's incredibly hard. So it's kind of this is very extremely bashing effect, and it's a very interesting texture to work on, to perform on. But also, as mentioned right at the beginning there, my love of the snare drum. This is the kind of the snare drummer's snare drum in terms of the sound. It's that right. Immensely high, tight, and exciting sound. So it's something I would still like to study more.
Tight is a word that I think we can all relate to. You can hear the different kinds of drums in any kind of concert situation you've been in, but that extremely wired, hard sound that just jumps out from the back of an orchestra is a very tight sound, is what we would call it. So going through school, so where did you go to university, or where did you go to school? When you kicked into I want to be a musician, was this around 13, 14? Was this early?
Yeah. It was going to Orchestra of Scotland when I was 13, and again that was an immense experience. And gave me my first taste of a piece of new music in which I took part, because the orchestra, this was 1990, commissioned Edward Maguire, the Scottish composer, to write a piece of music for the city of Glasgow in its the Year of Culture. So it was called the Glasgow Symphony, and it was a celebration of the city musically and historically. Looked at different eras of the city, different types of music. There was folk music in there. There was folk melodies, Scottish tunes, and so forth. But it was also this very intense and occasionally rather dissonant piece of music, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was just amazing, and there was a real composer there. Maguire was there, and I met him and got to ask him questions about the piece, and it was just amazing, you know. So I think a lot of lights were coming on for me then. And then I must tell you something which occurred to me straight away when I knew we'd be talking, is that when I was 15, I went to London to take part in the Shell London Symphony Orchestra Music Scholarship. Right. And this was in June 1992. And one of the first events they had planned was a trip to the Barbican to hear On the Town.
No.
Yeah, sure.
On the Town. How fun was that? How fun was that?
Conducted by Michael Tilson Thomas and
yeah,
starring
and the
yourself.
LSO. Yeah, well, one of us anyway.
Yeah, there was an amazing lineup that night. You know, Cleo Lane and all kinds of extraordinary...
God, Cleo Lane and her husband John. Oh my God, and the wonderful soprano, American soprano, under Tom Stewart's wife. Oh, I can't Evelyn Lear. You know, she was there, and of course, you know, it was wonderful. Flicker was there, and Cook from TV. But it was Michael's brainchild. Have you ever worked with Michael? Have you had a chance to work with Michael?
I've not actually. I've met him a couple of times.
Yeah.
He's had me come to New World Symphony a couple of times.
I was going to ask you if you had anything to do with New World Symphony.
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. But I must say, going to the Barbican for the first time and hearing the LSO and that On the Town, that was another moment where it's just, I mean, you know, hearing the LSO play Bernstein. I mean, you were in the thick of it, so you could add words to this, but it's quite a sound. It's quite a vibe.
Oh, it's quite a sound. It's quite a sound.
All the history there,
and that was
and the way
the late 40s, and Lenny bringing in the orchestra, but at the middle of it is sitting a trap set and every other bloody, you know, all the other percussion instruments. I think one of the things, you know, I know a little bit about you, Will, because I'm quite good friends with Martin Grubiger, and who is an extraordinary Austrian percussionist as well. I'm sure you know, and colleagues and so forth. But I think something that surprises us not in that world, and probably general music lovers in general, is it what you do when we say percussionism, but yet you're so based in harmony and melody and piano and music, and of course to play the xylophone or the vibraphone or any other of those phones. Is as much a musical context and harmony context as it is just percussion. When the word percussion is usually used, people think somebody's going to be banging around on something and has essentially only with rhythm to do with rhythm. But in fact, there's this extraordinary musical training that is elemental to what you do as a percussionist. Am I on the right track here?
Yeah, I mean, I very much hope that you know, that the approach that I have when I perform music is, I mean, I try and make it as deep and as a complete a musical experience as you would hear in any genre, and of course it's only as fine as the music I play. So this has been the main thing in my career, has been to create new repertoire, because I always felt that percussion was the most dignified art form and the one with the most gravitas and beauty and joy and energy and profundity. For me, it was very, very clear, but I could see that there were barriers there due to the yeah, certain types of direction that the repertoire had maybe taken that I didn't particularly feel close to. And I still have strong ideas about the repertoire and how things should go, and how they can go, and what things can sound like. But yeah, we percussionists, the level now is, I mean, I sat on the jury for the opening round of the Geneva competition a couple of years ago. I mean, the mind boggles. I mean, the level, people playing marimba, like you can't believe it, really. The technicality, not chops. I mean, that's something else, but just the real technical prowess and depth that people have is quite a time to be a percussionist, I can tell you. Yeah, amazing.
Well, I mean, and I want to get to we're going to get to the new music and to all that, but I'm still just trying to pick up also for our public, you know, how one assembles the various building blocks that make a you. And so we've got the percussion, we've got the musical training, you're going through school, you've committed to this. I mean, so was it first drums was really driving the whole thing? Are we talking about trap set as well? Are we talking about, you know, all the facility as well? As I know that in Martin's concerts, you know, I look at the stage and I just laugh at all the various things. And of course, he athletically is running from one thing to the other, and the sounds of it. And it, you know, it's quite exhilarating. I mean, it's what you guys do. I mean, there's a certain, pardon the phrase, there's a certain circus environment to some of it. And I don't mean that in any belittling way, exactly the opposite. It's just a jaw-dropping experience to hear and see what you guys do. You are more well-known, and you're in my orbit as a classical musician because of your serious commitment to avant-garde and to musical elements that need to become more of the mainstream. That is the new way to look at music. But like I said, we'll get to that. So when you're a kid and you're going up, what are some of the seminal moments as you're 17, 18, 19? When did you feel like, aha, we're going to make this? Were you playing drums in a rock band for a while? Could your friends call you up and say, hey, can you help us out on the weekend? We're doing a Rotary Club. Or, I mean, or was it just not anything like that?
No, I mean, I think what I still enjoy about being a percussionist is that I never know from one week to the next, month, year to the next, what on earth I'm going to be playing. And certainly in the student years, I mean, I went to Royal Academy, you know, and the recent history for me then had been, like I mentioned, going to London for the Shell LSO Music Scholarship,
right.
Which oddly enough, I actually got the gold medal, which was a real bolt out of the blue for me. And I became very, very close with Neil Percy and Kurt Hans Gödecke and the orchestra, and they took me under their wing. And I went to Royal Academy to study with them, and very much to study as an orchestral player. But I was really interested in new music, and the marimba has come a long way even since then. And this is the mid-90s now. And I was very interested in learning more about the marimba, but it was such a new thing. There were only a very few 5-octave marimbas in existence in the UK at that time. I mean,
When did you start? When was the first time? How old were you when you first started the marimba? And I mean, and please give us I mean, all the various xylophones, mebophones, marimba, how all of those things. When did you start on that?
I borrowed a xylophone from my first percussion teacher, age 13. I got my first marimba when I was 15 and played my first marimba concerto when I was 16. I got a vibraphone with the money that I won in that scholarship with the London Symphony. I bought a vibraphone.
Okay, hang on. I just got to stop us because I've got people. I know people are watching this going, "That's fantastic, Mom. What's a xylophone?" You know. So you said vibraphone, xylophone, marimba, those three. Obviously, you must have taken it, as we say, like a duck to water. Did it just? Was there what was it like the first time you played one of those instruments? Did it just make sense to you?
Well,
was it like playing the piano with sticks?
I mean, they're hard. I would have to say, and I don't think it's just me, they're hard instruments to play. I mean,
I think they're horrifying. That's why I'm asking. I love the sound. I'm in complete awe of you guys. But I'm glad you said that, because I think we all kind of go, good God, how does he do that? And the sticks and all this kind of stuff, and these in the thirds and the sixths and the sevenths, and one hand's doing one thing and you're blah, 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 blah. I mean, my God, it's like watching Milt Jackson in the jazz quartet. I mean, it's just amazing what you can bring. I mean, pardon the interruption, but I'm glad you said it's a difficult instrument. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What's the difference between? Walk us through some differences of the instruments.
Absolutely. So the xylophone that started on, that's the kind of ragtime instrument. It's the higher pitched of the wooden keyboard instruments. You hear them in cartoon music. You hear them in certain orchestral settings. Stravinsky used it quite a lot. For example, Bartók used the xylophone in the orchestra a lot. So it's that kind of blink, that very sharp sound, or like a ragtime kind of sound. The marimba is the sort of the bigger beast of the wooden keyboard instruments. Although they share some of the same register, there's an overlap in register. The high register marimba overlaps with the lower register of the xylophone. The marimba does now extend down right off the bass clef to the bottom C, which is the same. We call it the cello C because it's the same note as the bottom note in the cello. So it's this fine, lovely toned wooden instrument, this beautiful kind of burgundy, as it's often said, sound, gorgeous, rich, and a lot of chorales and harmonies, 4 sticks, 4 or 5, 6, 7, 10 sticks, and the vibraphone, exactly. And your vibraphone is your Milt Jacksons, your Gary Burtons, and very many fine players, present day vibraphone players, used in jazz, pop, Latin. Again, it's a whole area of study. I sort of dabbled in jazz vibraphone and realized it was going to be a lifetime. So I kind of parked it back in my early 20s. But they're the main keyboard instruments: the vibraphone, the marimba, and to a certain extent the xylophone. But yeah, they don't come easy. There's no sense of touch on the keyboard. So at least with the piano, someone like myself, very ham-fisted pianist, but I can get the notes going quite quickly. On the marimba, I mean, I practiced marimba today. I'm in Sweden at the moment. I'm preparing for a concert, and playing this marimba concerto that I've played dozens of times, but today, had the metronome on slow and picking out the notes once again, and it's just a process. It really is, for me anyway.
You should do it. Yeah. You should do an Instagram live and to all of your worthy students and say, folks, and because it's the same thing with a singer, I mean, I was working on a piece a couple of months ago, or just last month, at the Così fan tutte, and doing Alfonso instead of Guglielmo and so forth. And every once you just have to. And I called up the pianist and I said, I need an hour. I just need to go through. Can we just do this slowly a minute? Can we just make sure that the sound is right in the heart of it and that it's moving one to the other? I can imagine that. And I think sometimes our worthy colleagues following in our footsteps think that at some point it happens, and they underestimate that. If you don't like to grind, find something else to do.
Oh, here. It's a process, and for me, the only way is this slow, methodical practice. Yeah. And because with percussion, the gestures are quite big. I mean, a fiddle player, a lot of it's here. It's incredibly tough too for different reasons. But for percussionists, it's these big movements, and it's you have to go through things slowly. It's a bit like playing speed darts or like the 3-point contest at the NBA, the All-Star weekend, taking one 3-pointer after another. I mean, it's this incredibly difficult action at a high speed, and you gotta go slow to play fast.
Oh, listen to that, ladies. All you wonderful colleagues, if you're watching this, say that again. You got to go slow if you want to go fast.
You got to.
That is
you
true.
got to go slow if you want to play fast.
every instrument, every singing, if you're going to sing Italian, very fast patter stuff, it has to be slow and hooked up before it moves forward. You can't speak. Anyway, I could go off. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. That's exactly why I turned myself in, because you get so glib at this, and no. It's got to be in the heart. It's got to be anchored. It's got to have
center
a purpose. So, do you spend most of your time on the marimba,
in
and
the
also
end,
drums?
In the end, I probably do. I mean, I very much enjoy the fact that with percussion, you can have this spread. At the moment, I'm revising one of my favorite concertos, which is by a Dutch Joey Rauken. And this is in that piece, there are 4 setups. So there's a marimba setup that has a few other sounds close by, some cymbals, tempo blocks. There's a big drum setup, which the composer designed, and it's got things I play with my feet, as well as a large range of drums and cymbals. There's a xylophone setup with some lighter sounds like a triangle and some go-go bells. And then there's the vibraphone for kind of more dreamlike music. So
right.
It's making sense of all these different disparate sounds in one piece. It is something that I think about a lot, so that it doesn't turn into sort of some kind of display item, the dreaded circus that you mentioned and that we try to avoid. It's sort of, it's got elements of that, but it must never be just that. And
music
trying to streamline everything and yeah, exactly.
It was interesting. You were talking just a little bit back. Sorry to interrupt you. And also the connection is a little bit laggy, but a little bit back, you were comparing. You were talking about this cello C and so forth, and you were talking about the marimba and its registers, and it sounded to me like there was such an obvious association with orchestral sounds. And probably, is there a part of the marimba that's really like the higher strings, and there's probably a viola part? Is there a place that's particularly the winds? When you're playing with an orchestra, is that sort of coming in, or is that how you actually perhaps even become attracted to a concerto, because it has this wonderful dialogue with orchestral colors?
Absolutely. One thing that I really try and do playing with orchestras is this business of blend, and when to go in to an orchestral color, and then maybe when to withdraw from it and ride on top of it or be underneath it. I'm sure that's something I would love to pick your brains about, but just how you relate to the texture around you. And it's such a privilege as well when you're standing at the front, is that you can play with that. And it took a while, but I think with percussion, you can do that. It's also to do with touch and the kinds of mallets that you use and the choices you make. Soft mallets, kind of medium hard mallets, and then the very kind of sharp mallets, and lots of choices. And mallet choice, the kind of sticks you use, say a lot about a player. It's something that I think about a lot.
Is that, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that. I would have forgotten to ask about that, because that's one of the first things that we as normal human beings watching what you do, we see this enormous palette of chopsticks with heads up there that you're going to take and see such precise choice of changing. And sometimes it's a very speedy change, and this section has to be with these and without. So first of all, how many different mallet heads could potentially come into play for you? And how many mallet heads are there in general? And is the weight of the stick also a factor, not just the mallet head itself? I mean, this is a whole, and is this something you learn from great percussionists, or is this a path that one as a percussionist follows their own, becomes, as you say, identifying of how they play? A lot of the questions wrapped up in there. I hope you can follow that.
Yeah. Very questions. Well, when I started out, there were only 1 or 2 ranges available from some of the bigger firms, but now there's just so much choice out there. I actually have my own mallets made for me also by a company called Marimba One, who I work closely with, and I use them a lot, as you might expect, but I at home I have. I mean, don't ask my quartet members. They always shriek with horror when they come into my music room and see the mallet bags groaning away in the corner, just mallets everywhere. I mean, limitless different materials. I mean, there are rubber mallets, there are yarn mallets, there are wooden mallets, plastic. And the weighting is definitely a thing. I actually tend to use quite light mallets, but certainly there are much heavier mallets, which I also sometimes use. And it's essential. I mean, it's everything. And how one gains taste in mallet choice as a percussionist through experience. I mean, I was very influenced by the percussion duo, the Safri duo, and they were around when I was in my student days, and they played the mallet instruments like no other percussionist I had seen at that point. They played with really not the hardest mallets, not at all, kind of medium soft end, but they really gave it welly. So they played very almost forcefully with these kind of not very hard sticks, but the sound was huge. It was vast. I mean, they would do recitals in Wigmore Hall, and it would just, the whole place would just, there'd be this bloom, you know, it was amazing. And I think that they really influenced me with this sort of very warm sound, but quite a big sound, and not overly harsh, you know. I use hard sticks when I need to get that articulation, but generally, it's looking for that degrees of warmth within one sound.
So this is fascinating. I'm really enjoying this. I'm learning something. You obviously started rather early with the LSO, and they've been sort of part of your cradle, as it were. Now you're artist in association at South Bank. And I think out of that, as well as, I mean, somehow it feels organic. The LSO grew the relationship. Now the South Bank is there. Somewhere in there, you started the Colin Currie Group, and then you also started your own label. And you know, the sky is the limit. The rest, as they say, is history. Can you walk us through the genealogy of how it happened, and then we'll get to some of the new releases?
Sure. Well, I lived in London for many years, and I very much.
Does that mean you don't live in London any longer?
Yeah, I moved back to Scotland in November 2019. Yeah.
Well done.
So, yeah, I now live on the outskirts of Glasgow, so I've moved to the west, which is.
I'm not going to ask you about Brexit yet.
Oh boy. Well,
sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead. Don't mean to distract you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, gosh, Brexit is a.
Don't even go there.
Yeah, caught me off guard. Yeah. So being in London, I mean, I would just go to endless orchestral concerts, and at a certain moment, actually, I would have to say the London Philharmonic, the LPO, kind of made a connection with me and started supporting some of my new commissions. And I've actually given 3 of my biggest world premieres have been with the LPO, and that's been in quite recent years, starting with the concerto by Eno Johanni Rautavaara, and that was in 2009, followed in 2012 by one of my real big hitters, a piece that also is played by Martin Grubinger, the concerto Siedi by Kalevi Aho.
Yeah.
I premiered that in 20. Yeah, great piece, astounding. That was with the LPO and Osmo Vanska in 2012. And then in 2019, Helen Grime concerto with Maren Alsop. So the LPO have kind of, in terms of these new commissions, have really kept an eye out for me. And
also a wonderful partner with IDAGIO. They're the English orchestras really immediately recognize the potential and use the IDAGIO. The Global Concert Hall is a platform. We're the windows and doors. You know, we're not a production company. We're not Medici. We're not building a catalog. We just simply make concerts available for more people than they would be normally. And the proceeds of the paywall are immediately backed directly to the artist versus all this other machination. If I can just digress for a minute on IDAGIO, and I didn't want to make it sound like tonight was just focused on it. So thank you for mentioning LPO. They're a wonderful orchestra and good for you. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
I had a question.
It was a bit of a presence at the South Bank.
Sorry.
Yeah.
As you're tying this up, you've mentioned commissions. Is this something that the orchestras do, or this is something you come to the orchestra with? I'd like to do this piece, or this person would like to write for me. I need someone to commission it. Or do you have a fund of your own where you can literally just go out, or probably now the orchestras trust you and they say, and you put it together, person, composer, and orchestra? How does that work? Because you have that is one of the things you're really famous for. I mean, you are commissioning more works per month than anybody in the business, period.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that fascinates me the most are the composers and just the breadth of the music and all the different personalities and characters and all these great stories now, and also a lot of pieces still coming. I mean, obviously some cancellations at this point, but a lot still to come, and things to look forward to. Yeah, I mean, I typically go after composers and try and get the timing right. I mean, timing's everything, I think. And then when there's a legitimate hookup and the composer feels that the time might be right, then with the help of my excellent agents, we go around orchestras or festivals and usually try and line up, 2, 3, 4, or sometimes 5 orchestras, right, to commission a piece. I mean, for example, in the instance of the Kaleviaho concerto, that was commissioned by the London Philharmonic, BBC Philharmonic, Luosto Classic Festival in Finland, and the Gothenburg Symphony. And every concerto is kind of the same. There are many partners involved usually. So we spread bet and we split the costs, and that's how we get these big concertos off the ground usually with 2
and apropos
or 3
costs,
or sometimes more parts.
Having you show up is like, well, we're going to need a Simovan at the airport if you don't mind. I mean, or do you schlep everything around, or do you use on-site instruments?
I use on-site. I mean, I worked out very early on in my career that this was going to be the only way to be mobile enough, sufficiently quick as I move around on getting from continent to continent in formerly, or perhaps sometime again in the future, a full concert diary. It's 1 week in Toronto, the next week's in Valencia, the next one's in Nagoya. So right. Yeah, I and also with percussion and the proliferation of the instruments, it was difficult at first, but now there's just so much equipment out there, and every major city or symphony orchestra will easily be able to source the big stuff. I mean, again, a bit like one's mallets, I've got a very particular choice in the types of cymbals that I use. So I always bring my own cymbals. And then some of the smaller things as well. So there's usually a couple of suitcases, but that gets the job done mercifully,
That's fantastic. So where in I think we've got a nice flow here. So where did the Colin Currie recording label come from in your mind, and what are you able to do with that? And is that also part of your commissioning? I mean, I suppose you touched a little bit on that, but is there a sort of it seems like you're in a new, regardless of COVID, and I think you in an interview used the phrase the bulldozer in our schedule. It's been disastrous, but do you feel like you're starting to get a nice center of gravity to what you want to help create, as well as the performance of, and creating the listening experience, and even your own legacy, as it were, on recorded sound? Yeah, well,
I mean, I found out quite early on that I do really enjoy making records. I made an EMI debut disc when I was 20 years old, and I had Abbey Road Studio 1 to myself for 3 days, and that was a whole lot of fun. And I think I got the bug immediately. You know, I had a really good, yeah, isn't it amazing? Yeah, of course. And I had a really good producer, John Fraser, and I was very intrigued by the relationship that one would have with a producer working at that level. So yeah, I really do like making records, and you know, when you go to the booth and have a listen and it sounds good, and it's what everything that you feel you've been working for. It's this incredible excitement, and it is rewarding. But I do also want to put down my markers, especially for the pieces that have been written for me, I would have to say. And you know, my relationship with one composer in particular, Steve Reich, is a very personal one. I have my own approach. Well, it's not my own approach, but my approach to the music is very important to me. And in my group, the Colin Currie Group, I have a lot of extremely fine, like-minded performers, and we all feel the same way about the music. We have a certain touch that we like to have with the music. It's rather difficult to describe, and indeed that's why we pushed very hard to make these recordings. And in actual fact, the recording of drumming, large-scale work by Reich, was the spearhead for the start of my label. Right. We crowdfunded for this project. And at that point, the London Symphony Orchestra got involved, and they said, "We like this. You know, we think we can work together with you on this. Make you a label. We have all the channels open. We like what you're doing. And what else do you want to do?" So that was a great, you know, it felt like a huge responsibility, and it still is really. But
okay, we're going to do something fun here. I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do a screen sharing, and the next you should see is the IDAGIO website with none less Colin Currie, and these are records, probably not all of them, but maybe that are no, they can't be all of them, but it's a huge selection, and this is just putting in Colin's name. If you just, you know, if you go into the search field up here, and you can discover, it's going to be new. It's going to be new releases, and browse if you're just looking for things. By the way, there's, you know, 2.5 or something million tracks here, and over 20,000 classical composers. So you can have a nice weekend on idagio.com. The fun thing about Idagio, if I can just talk about it, is the streaming platform. It is a classical music platform. Think of, I hate to say this, you know, Spotify for classical music, but it's this classical music. The user interface is designed by classical musicians for the classical music loading. So if it's an andante, moderato, allegro scheme, it's going to stay that way, and it's very useful. The cross-referencing on the website is great fun. If you're listening to a piece and you want to see, you're probably on the right-hand side. I'm not going to take the time for it. All the other recordings in the catalog from other people will be available. Clearly, Mr. Currie's catalog will not have a lot of comparisons, because he's mapping out new paths here. Now, this Gruber recording, is that the newest one that you were just brought out, Colin? You wanted to talk about that? That's extremely exciting. I mean, you've got a lot of Reich on here, and I don't want to mow over that, because Steve Reich is one of the most important composers of our time. And I think I didn't realize how devoted and connected you were. It's brilliant music. I did listen to the drummers. I mean, it's just, you know, my goodness, what a piece. But I think this last Gruber piece, which is a composer that we're really starting to, I think, burst into the general consciousness, as it were. I'm going to come back out. That's a new release, as it were?
Yes, absolutely. That's the fourth album on my label. And what happened with that was it's two concertos. He has written these very contrasting pieces from different times in his career. Quite an early work from the early 80s, Rough Music, which is a 3-movement percussion concerto. Right. One of those very, very important works in the repertoire. I think a breakthrough piece, and one that was very influential on what happened next in the percussion concerto literature. I'm certain of that. And then the much more recent work, Into the Open, which I premiered at the Proms at the Albert Hall in 2015. And a very, very different piece, different use of percussion, a very different atmosphere in the piece. Whilst rough music is quite boisterous at times and quite playful, Into the Open is, there's a little more, it's a bit hard to explain. It's a piece that's written, it's dedicated to the memory of a great friend of the composer, David Drew, who was the repertoire man for Boozy and Hawks. And David and Nali were great friends, and they were very similar, and they were both very eccentric and passionate and wonderful gentlemen from that generation. And the loss of David was bitter for Gruber. And although the piece, it's certainly not mournful, and there are moments when it erupts into great high points of joy as well. It's a piece that's very reflective, and indeed in the end really kind of melts down into anguish. The loss of this friend, I think, eventually is too much for the music and the structure of the piece, and it sort of succumbs to real kind of horrifying but very authentic outpouring of grief. These two works, I mean, they combine for the most spectacular, combination, concertante combination for any instrument. But as a percussionist, you can hear in the pieces that they used instruments so diversely and so beautifully and so maturely. I was delighted to have the chance to make this album, and because I want to thank the BBC Philharmonic, which is the orchestra for both of these live performances. So the rough music is taken from a concert in the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, and Into the Open is from the prom that I gave with the orchestra in 2015. And they sound incredible. They're just amazing, BBC Philharmonic. And to have an album released with them is it's a great honor, So that's the latest release, and I couldn't be happier with it. Again, had a wonderful producer, Marion Schwabel, who worked hard to sort of construct the final sound for the album, and I'm really pleased with it. It packs a punch. Great music, beautiful,
I'll listen
big.
To it. I can hardly wait.
Bizarre,
to go on. And you can listen to it on your headphones, on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your computer, in the car, walking down the street, in your bedroom. That's the beauty of IDAGIO streaming, and you can do that. I don't want to take. We've had a wonderful conversation. It's great to get to know you, and I can hardly wait to visit one of your wonderful concerts. I mean, on the seat excitement and brilliantly overwhelming, and all these accolades and adjectives that come up, I'm sure don't do it justice. So I can hardly wait. If we can just maybe. I mean, it seems to me, if I don't want to make it this political statement or political show here, but it seems to me between COVID and Brexit that my dearest colleagues in the music industry, especially the high arts, and I don't like that phrase, high arts, in the arts and performing arts industry in England, really kind of got a double wallop in this. I noticed on your website, I was going to show everybody your website, but your name is so wonderfully memorable, colincurrie.com. But I noticed that when I wanted to listen on your website, that there was a disclaimer saying, until you'd straighten out the Brexit stuff, that orders in AU were not possible, and some of the listening. And so I got rerouted to SoundJam, which was cool. But I went over to IDAGIO.com to have a listen to some of the albums. What's your take on the current situation on both levels? Am I right in saying it's a double wallop?
It certainly feels that way. Of course, COVID was the very immediate catastrophe for the arts. I mean, of course, it's a global pandemic, and it brings much bigger problems than that. But since this is our discussion for the arts, it's immediately lights out. I mean, I've not given a concert for for as long as I can remember now. And you know,
Wow.
I'm just this week coming out of 5 months of unemployment. So it's no fun, and it's a worry. You know, it's stressful. It's challenging. It's so many things. So COVID was the quick kind of slap in the face.
Yeah.
Brexit will be a problem that for us, the likes of myself, that will take time to show its ugly face. And it's galling even already to come to Sweden for this particular trip. Going through Schiphol Airport was certainly no longer the breeze it used to be. And I had to get permission to enter Europe. And when I was greeted with this terminology, you know, from someone who's, you know, just doing their job, but, you know, it made my blood run cold. I'm coming here to play a marimba concerto by an Austrian composer in Sweden, traveling via the Netherlands, and that's now frowned upon. So it's a bad place. Yeah, will I fight it? Absolutely. We need to get an arrangement. Basically, the artists, such as myself, have a no deal, and we were told that no deal was not happening. But that's exactly how it feels. It feels like we now have no deal. So
is Scotland? I mean, in Scotland, and you have this wonderful prime minister, and I mean the independence of Scotland is a wonderful subject, and we don't want to go down that. But do you see the possibility that Scotland could, in fact, perhaps create a deal for artists that would be independent of the United Kingdom in general? Is that possible?
If they were enough, but I think we're not there yet. I mean, the Scottish independence seems to be a little bit derailed at present. It's very complicated. I mean, I was not at all into the idea of the UK separating from Europe, and Scotland separating from the UK would bring problems as well as possibilities, I'm sure. So, you know, too many issues. You know,
and being an American, but having such a firm foot in Europe. My wife is Austrian, and you know, I spend a great deal of time here. In fact, during the COVID, I have been in Europe the entire time. I haven't been able to fly home, and you know, my mother's 90, almost 91, which has been a big problem. I mean, we're stuck, and I don't want to ride. I'm not going to go 13 hours in a plane as a kind of, you know, bad poker game with COVID. I'm just not going to do that. It would be irresponsible to my family, but nevertheless, I mean, there's a lot of problems. But focusing on Brexit, sitting in these two places, Brexit never made any sense to me. And as it just as a general concept, it just doesn't. I think it was the wrong answer to the wrong questions. But never mind. But what was obvious as this thing took shape is that exactly what you just described for the performing arts, for the arts and humanities, for the educational world. I have good friends who are professors who have been domiciled in Europe and UK, and the expertise of the UK educational system that we need in Europe, and also vice versa. This has just stopped dead in its tracks. And now, if I wanted to, as an American, come to do a concert in Wigmore Hall or South Bank or something, what I would have to jump through hoops to get the proper visa and come in, and where am I coming from? And I mean, I hope, I don't know, can you feel that? I guess where I'm going in this rant is it perceivably getting better, or are we just stuck in that new now as well?
I'm an optimist. I think, you know, one thing at a time. COVID is certainly the beast to wrestle to the ground first.
Well put.
But fortunately, you know, Europe is made up of relatively small countries. You know, I'm in Sweden this week, and I'm hoping to go to Austria soon, etc. You know, so it feels as if with each country we may be able to come cap in hand and find a way. Look, anything's possible. It's just a deal. So I mean, deals can be made, and trade-offs can be accepted by both parties. But common sense has to prevail, and for the arts, it actually is a no-brainer.
There's the
it's a
rub.
no-brainer. Yeah, there's the rub. Yeah,
there's the rub. Common sense.
Yeah, yeah, quite. But in the sense that this freedom of movement for artistic and creative people just has to be. And I still feel that we, myself, yourself, and everyone else fighting this corner, we will find a way. We've been dragged into a fight that we didn't want, and we can fight our way out of it.
What a wonderful way to end the conversation. I do have one last question. You are a Scotsman, so do you play golf?
Oh boy, I don't.
This has limitations on the depth of our friendship. If you notice, I've been having a wee drink here every so often. Very good. I'm an avid golfer and have played some of the great courses in Scotland. I mean, the most thrilling thing I ever did. I was at the Edinburgh Festival, and they needed me to pick up something that somebody canceled, and I jokingly said, "If you can get me on Muirfield for 18 holes, I'll do it for free." Now, that was the stupid thing to say, because of course they got me on Muirfield, and of course I had to work for free. But I played Muirfield, which is like, I mean, I don't want to be sacrilegious in Ramadan, but it is really the Mecca for golfers. It is, I mean, Muirfield Golf and Country. I mean, it's just, I really was pinching myself the whole round. I didn't play badly, but Muirfield tends to spit, middle handicap golfers out the window. But never mind, that's my story on golf. It never came across your radar. Do you think golfers are silly?
I should. No, absolutely not. Far from it. I played golf when I was young. What I was going to say is that one day I'll introduce you to my father, who's a avid golfer, and he could get you onto the links courses in Gillen, just outside Edinburgh, or North Berwick. So yeah, drop me a line next time. I've played North Berwick. We'll get you around at Gillen.
I've played North.
Okay.
I've played North Berwick. Yeah, absolutely wonderful.
So I'll see you in the.
We'll see you in the concert. We'll play around the next morning. Yeah, I love it. Colin, it's been great. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize if there's been some lag. The server connection hasn't been ideal this evening. I will find out that that's right, but be patient with the conversation. It's been a wonderful conversation. Colin, great to meet you. ColinCurrie.com. Look at his schedule. Look at his releases. IDAGIO.com, a wonderful selection of music that is not just wonderful about Colin, but it's also wonderful because Colin, and I really mean this from my heart, you are offering paths of oral paths, audible paths, oral paths of musical possibilities that are of our time, and they're not easy sometimes. And they may not even make sense to us sometimes, but they're so important. And you do it with such consummate dedication and such beautiful tone and such, as we've heard in this conversation, such fantastic fantasy of what sound musical elements can mean and where we can push that down. Of course, the composers that you're friends with and are commissioning from are the who's who of this thought of our new time and our new music. And I cannot congratulate you enough. It's very exciting. I don't know if our paths will, as performers, ever cross, but I can promise you, as a fan, I will knock on your dressing room door.
Well, very much likewise. It's a real treat to speak with you, and I will keep my eyes peeled for it next time you're back in Scotland. And look forward to hearing your concert. And who knows? I might have taken up golf by then.
We'll have a round. Great. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our conversation right at 1 hour, which I wasn't sure would go that way, but thank you for staying with us. Thank you for your loyalty to IDAGIO Live, the series. Thank you for your continued curiosity to who shows up every Thursday and who shows up every Tuesday to talk about song and every possible manifestation We're having a wonderful series this month. It's actually a takeover of one of my dear colleagues and friends in America, Stephen Rogers, who is spending the month of April in the world of women's composers. Women who compose is, I think, what we should accurately call it. So it's quite fun. Have a look on Tuesdays. And next Thursday, I never announce who's coming, but I can promise you it's going to be interesting and great fun. Colin, great to meet you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time so generously. Good luck in your first concert in 5 months. And I will look at your schedule and see if I can see you in Austria. That'd be great fun.